Welcome to Made in Moray, the podcast that focuses on the successes and struggles of local businesses. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm G. I'm your host, and today I have the pleasure of sitting down with Jason Fletcher from 44. Jason, can you tell me a little bit about what this building does?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the building is a former furniture store, and before that, it was a bingo hall and cinema. So it's got quite an old frontage to it, Art Deco. But the within the building, what we've done is completely changed. So we have everything from a gym, kickboxing studio, fitness studios, and we have a number of beauty and health businesses, hairdressers. We also have a cafe, restaurant in the floor as well. So I think in total we've somewhere in the region of about 8 different entities within the building as businesses. So we're a bit of a health and fitness hub for kind of Lossiemouth and that the sort of coastal group of villages heading down towards Burghead.
Super. And what's your function here?
Mainly I'm the kind of the manager. I operate as a personal trainer and coach, and in the main just manage the shifts and work with clients and some of the guys who work here and try and make it all function from day to day.
Mm-hmm. Super. So the business is here now, but it wasn't always here. So what's the story of the business? How did it begin? What's the origin?
Sure. We my wife and I, by accident, ended up owning a kickboxing school. We'd operated in an old bingo hall, another bingo hall, just around the corner from this one. We'd been there for about 4 to 5 years. We kind of grew from that. We became quite successful. We operated. We had guys go to world championships. They come back with gold medals and the like. We operate nationally. We have kids from the age of 3 right the way up to a couple of senior citizens who have been involved over the years. And basically it's about helping. That was always about helping people achieve to their level. Not everybody has to go to the world champions. Not everybody has to compete. I mean, obviously we encourage them to do that, but they find their level within the sport. And so long as they take what they want from it, then we're all kind of happy with it, and that has nurtured a really good kind of sense of achievement for everybody that's here.
Mm-hmm. What's it like having a business like this in a region which is quite small? Are there pressures on the business because the region is quite small? How does the environment affect the business?
The environment affects every business, I imagine, whether that's martial arts as a whole. Within Moray is very competitive. I would almost argue it's saturated. There are a lot of clubs who do various types of martial arts, whether that be taekwondo, kickboxing, MMA, BJJ, so that there are quite a few of those clubs in the area. So we compete on that front. And then in terms of the gym and the fitness classes, up until about 2 years ago, actually there wasn't a great deal here. But in the last 2 years, that's kind of grown a lot with a few chains that have moved. Well, one chain has moved in, another one's planning to move in. There's been another charity set up which has built a fairly big establishment on the outskirts of Elgin. So yeah, in terms of those things, I wouldn't put them as out and out competitors, but it does draw on what your potential client list is. However, in Lossiemouth, which is our focus, really there's ourselves in the community centre, and both of us we attract different markets, if you like. There are people that will cross between the two, but there are actually not that many. Mm-hmm. But what I would say is, in terms of that, we've also have a lot of clients from Hopeman, Cummingston, Burghead. We've got a few that come as far afield as far as an Elgin, but the vast majority are centred really around the Lossiemouth bubble.
Mm-hmm. Do you think there's an element of the competition of having other similar businesses that benefits?
Benefits this business or benefits the clients?
Well, you could talk about both. I mean, it's 2 different aspects, isn't it?
It benefits us in some ways because we then can find a niche, and we're not trying to provide everything for everybody. So I would stylize our gym as more boutique style. Our classes are, and when I say boutique, it's not the kind of the feminine kind of immediate piece you would look at. It's more to say we're a bit more specialized. Our fit exercise to music classes are in a fairly smallish studio, and that's deliberately been done to keep the classes a bit more intimate for the clients and for the instructors, so the instructors can actually pass on information far more readily. If you're in front of 30 or 40 people, really you're just a bit of a show pony in front of a big crowd, and your interactions with those client sets are just going to be on the stage firing instructions out for them to follow. Whereas in the smaller classes, you're far more able to break out and help people improve their form and make sure that they're safe. It's a far more you're far more able to have that interaction with the clients, and I think our clients benefit from that, but I think that's what they like, because they don't feel like they're just left to kind of get on with it and just follow the person at the front of the class. We do have some areas where we can upsize the classes, and we have had classes up to 30 before now, but they're generally more instructional style classes rather than an exercise to music class. And generally we'll also have what we call shadows, so that you may have an instructor, but you'll have somebody shadowing that instructor to get in amongst the clients to make sure we're all on there, we're all safe, and we're getting the most out of that session. So it can be coaching, it can be motivational type things, it can be helping somebody make sure that their knees are tracking in the right direction, that they're not getting too heavy with the weights, and that they're actually descaling a workout. Or if they're coasting a little bit, then maybe just giving them a bit more encouragement to dig a little bit deeper and help them there. So, and in terms of the gym itself, we're all free weights. We are quite light when it comes to CV equipment. We have row machines, ski erg, and our spinning bikes. So our indoor cycling bikes are used within classes, but out with those classes, the clients are free to go in and use them as a CV machine. But by and large, most guys, that steady state cardio, it's kind of not what we're about. The big guys, the bigger operators in town have all that kind of equipment. We don't need it. We feel that we can get a lot more for our clients, again, by having a bit more of a one-to-one sort of piece with them within the gym, and help educate them and help build their knowledge up. So some people will come in with lots of knowledge, maybe some preconceptions that about what they should be doing, and we'll always have those conversations in terms of chatting and making sure that they're safe first and foremost. But we also have a lot of clients that would never have dreamed of stepping into a free weights gym ever, and they've come in, and we've spent a bit of time with them. We've helped them sort of just we've helped them and encouraged them to learn what moves they should be learning, what techniques they should learn first and foremost, how they get better at those techniques, maybe how they load them up. And when I say load them up, that's not to go heavy weights all the time. It's the sets, reps, weights, time of training. We'll chew the fat with them around diet and things like that. So it is first and foremost for us about our contact time with clients, not about here's some equipment, go get on with it. There are providers that do that, and for some people that's absolutely fine. But for the vast majority of our clients, they do want a bit more knowledge, so that's why they tend to come to us.
Yeah, it sounds like the kind of place where if you're new to the activity, you'll be made to feel welcome. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely what it's about. We feel that activities in general, obviously there's the health implications of it, and therefore as a result of that, it should be accessible to everybody. Now, at the end of the day, first and foremost, we are a business, so we can't just give that away. So we are currently looking at mechanisms to perhaps help reduce that cost for certain individuals who may be from disadvantaged backgrounds and the like. But in the main, we've done that. I run a strength and conditioning program, and initially it was targeted around amateur sports people who wanted to improve their performance in their given sport, and we spent a lot of time on switching focus within a framework to make sure that they do that. What we had were people who like the idea of lifting weights and strength and conditioning, but they don't do sport. They've no real interest in performance. So when we speak to them, we do set goals and objectives for their program, and it will say, well, we expect you to raise your deadlift probably by X%, depending on their ability and their previous experience in any fitness environment. And however, the offshot at the end is actually, that's really good. I've increased my deadlift by 30 kilos in 3 months. I'm really pleased. But actually, I feel so more confident. I feel better. I'm happier. I've learned a new skill and I'm using it, and I feel confident to come in here now and work out with the program, but still keep my goals in mind, but work at maybe a slower pace or a steadier pace that's more suitable for their lifestyle due to work or family commitments. So that's probably been those kind of soft skills. They've been the winner for a lot of our clients. That's where our focus has been, and that's certainly how that strength and conditioning has gone from that. It's evolved from that very much focused into performance. What do you do? How do you move in that sport? How much do you sprint, walk, jog, wrestle, tackle? How do you throw a ball, catch a ball? All this sort of thing. And how do we improve that? And where are your weaknesses? And let's work on those weaknesses. We've had guys come in with injuries and they're recovering from that. So we've looked at, we've got a physiotherapist that works in the building, so we frequently work with her as well and make sure that their programs are help to maximize their results and improve that performance. So we've gone from that, and we still do that, but we've also got a lot of people that I think the phrase is they just want to feel stronger. And so far the output of the strength and conditioning program has very much been that. Yeah. So, but it's stronger in mind as well as their body, if I'm honest. They don't feel, some particularly the female audience, they can come in and feel quite intimidated by a free weights environment. I would say we are about 50-50 male female within the guys who frequent the gym, and I would argue probably all of them now are pretty confident in walking in there and just getting on with it. If someone's new to the gym and we're walking around and there are clients in the gym, we generally introduce them in passing to those clients, so the next time they come in, they know that person. They don't know them, but they recognise a friendly face, and generally most of the guys here will say hi. They'll ask how they're doing or what they're doing, what they think they're up to, and so it's just an informality to it that helps a lot. And we encourage through things like our gym circuits and through we don't generally have a great deal of social events through the year, but what we do is our social event is actually the training. It's the classes, it's the chewing the fat in reception after class and things like that. And as an instructor, it can be quite demanding because you're trying to flip between classes and clients and to have those conversations so everyone feels valued, but at the same sense try and keep everybody happy is always going to be a bit of a juggling act, but we seem to be getting there. So yeah.
There's certainly a very nice atmosphere when you walk into the place. You get a feel when you walk into a building about the type of business, the type of people that are there, and that there's definitely this relaxed feeling here, this sort of lack of pressure, because you can walk into other gyms and other buildings and other businesses and other places, and you can sense that, oh my God, I don't fit in here. But it's definitely not a place like that. It's definitely a place that anybody can walk into.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that was always our aim. We even from our kickboxing, we've had several kids come in over the years who had an army family come in, and their son, they were waiting on an ADHD diagnosis, or they felt that way because he couldn't sit down in class for more than 2 minutes. They got posted 4 years later. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the boy. He is just absolutely full of beans and energy and needs to be challenged in the right way. And they were fortunate enough to find he enjoyed kickboxing, so that was something that he could work towards, and had that kind of, because of our grading system, had a sense of reward for it. There were times if he misbehaved in school, then absolutely you can't go to your kickboxing, which is something you like. So his parents were instilling a bit more discipline in him through that, but actually in the main, we found we found that when he was on the mats, yes, he could be mischievous, but that's what it was. It wasn't out and out naughty. He was certainly not a disruptive or a bad child in any kind of way. And yet, through that, he's left. He's now gone into school down in England, and he's doing really well. He's not actually kickboxing anymore. He's playing rugby and hockey for his school. He's loving it. So he's learnt the value of sport through kickboxing, and he's now applying that in other sports and through life. But we've also got a young man now who was a young boy with cerebral palsy. We've had other children with learning difficulties, and again they come on the mat and they achieve to their level and they work hard. So the boy with cerebral palsy, he is absolutely amazing. He's an inspiration to pretty much everyone within the club. He's in the classes. He doesn't get cut any slack. He still has to do what we all do. We accept that obviously his movement and balance is different, and therefore there are adaptations in place. But in terms of the mental game, in terms of the commitment that he's had to show and the determination to get through to achieve a black belt, it's still been there. So absolutely, and we've always been like that within the club since Jill and I took over the club. We've always been that pieces that we work with people with their issues, and we try and find a route for them. We don't just say, oh well, this isn't for you, and it would be too easy just to let them go. We do try and keep people within the club for the right reasons, and not because it's too hard for them, because something that's out with their control is influencing that, like a disability. So
it definitely sounds like a fully inclusive program of activities and a kind of care as well, where you realize that sports and physical activity is a very important part of people's life. It's not everything in their lives, but everything is connected. And people are not... people need to move, basically. People need to move, they need activity, they need to build up their strength, and even the mental aspect of it must be important.
Physical and mental is linked. There's no two ways about it. That there are so many studies out there, and obviously mental health is the awareness of mental health is raised incredibly over the last few years. But we so for us, yes, physical activity is connected to mental health. There's there's things like endorphin rush after that the old runner's high, as they used to call it. But after physical activity, you can feel quite good and quite have that sense of well-being. That's a hormonal response, and but then there's also a lot more of that sense of achievement.
You can answer that. Yeah. We're at the reception.
Okay. No,
you can answer that. It's perfectly okay. So let me ask you a little bit about the clients who come. You've mentioned already that there are some younger children. You've got some older people. There seems to be quite a cross spectrum from the community. Is there a mix in the types of experience and abilities that come in as well?
Within the client set, absolutely. So we've got some guys that will come in. We've had people come in from other clubs. They may have they may be a second dan or something like that, and then they've dropped off for various reasons, and then they've come back into the sport, but they've come to us. Same with the gym environment. We've got people who, in the summer months, for example, there's road cycling is very, very popular up here. So during the summer months, you'll see them disappear, and they're on the road on their bikes, and they're enjoying it. And then some of them will do events, so they might do sort of anything up to 100 miles and the like, and some of them will do time trials. Some will be far more competitive in terms of they'll enter races, and they look at that performance piece, and then they'll come in and they'll use that knowledge within the gym environment to help increase that performance. We've also got a group called Moray Cycle for Fun, which is just, I say just, but it's a handful of people within Lossie that go out every Thursday. Someone will host the group. They'll set off from that particular host house, or the host will pick the route for that evening. It doesn't always necessarily start and finish in Lossiemouth. They start and finish all over the place. And they're road cycling, and it's fun. So when they come in, it's about, during the winter months when they can't come in, it's about keeping a level of conditioning up through the winter months, so they can really enjoy that the following season. Some of that group now have gotten so into that kind of piece that actually, they're coming in and looking and saying, right, how do I get a bit stronger on the hills? How do I get a bit faster in certain areas? And how do I keep going? So for a lot of them, because they're certainly that 20-30 mile plus bracket, nutrition plays a huge part in that. So we'll talk about how they're feeding themselves pre-post event, but also how they're feeding themselves in their training cycles, and their general Monday to Friday, and making sure they're kind of getting the most out of it, so that they can actually enjoy their sport in a way it's not competitive, but they go out with their friends and they want to feel fit while they do it, and that's what we want. And that rubs off on what we were saying about mental health, because they put in that extra little bit of work in, and that they don't feel that they're holding the group behind, and they have that fun. Then the positivity that comes from that is so much better, in terms of their chosen activity that they prefer to do. So it rubs off right the way through, from whatever level you are, in terms of how you enjoy your sport, or your given activity, shall we say,
Oh, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the employees that work here within the building. What kinds of trainers do you have?
I have personal trainers, so I'm a personal trainer. I'm qualified sort of to teach one-to-one and small groups and things like that. We have gym instructors, so they can operate the kit and they can instruct in kit. They generally don't design things like programs and stuff like that, but they'll certainly, if someone's on a program, they can look at that, interpret it, and be able to provide best advice certainly in terms of form and things like that. Our coaches, we've got a couple of coaches and instructors here, so they're sports coaching, so they'll know, they'll have that bit of a softer skill rather than an instruction element. They'll work out what's working for a person, and this is where that mental piece comes in, because I can give somebody a cue, or a coach can give somebody a cue, and whilst they're not saying anything wrong and it's absolutely right, that person may not quite understand and may not be able to get that movement from what they're saying. So a good coach will be able to adapt what they're saying, how they and translate what, or put it in a format that individual can then do the movement the way that we need them to do that movement, but it comes across in a completely different way. So it might be simple things like a certain cue won't work, so I'll use a different cue. It gets them to think about a move in a slightly different way, and just that little trigger might help them do it, and invariably it does work that way. Sometimes we can break down. Mobile phones are fantastic, because this day and age, I would say most mobile phones have a video camera on. So if people are deadlifting, squatting and things like that, and there's little cues that we're not quite getting, I'll put the camera on them. I'll generally do it not in their face, so they do it. They know that we do video analysis type stuff. We'll show them the movement, and generally you get this aha piece. They understand. Then we can get the stylus out, and we can draw lines on that picture or that video and show them how to improve that movement. And it's not just on the big lifts as well. It's also on things like kickboxing. If someone's a footballer or a rugby player, we sometimes invariably go and watch them play and see certain things, and we'll relate those movements into the gym, certainly in conditioning phases. So we generally will take an approach of get somebody strong for their sport, because generally that takes the longest. Strength generally takes the longest adaptation. Neurological responses like learning a movement, they can be quite quick. You can learn certain skills very, very quickly. So they generally get focus, at the start to get them conditioned for a session, and then at the end of a particular program or a run into pre-season, that's when we get very sport specific or movement specific in what they want. Mm-hmm. But that said, I've had a lady that couldn't squat. Her version of a squat would be almost like a bow down. The knees hardly bend, and that's lack of balance, not necessarily a lack of pure mobility, but just the ability to move well between points. Mm-hmm. And to feel comfortable doing that. So we worked out a few approaches for her to remove some of her load from her body, to help her balance, and suddenly she's got her hips right down by her ankles. So she has actually got really good mobility in terms of the ability to get really low in a body squat. Mm-hmm. No load, no weights or anything like that. So we used a suspension trainer for a number of weeks to help her develop that. A few weeks later, we removed that suspension trainer and just played with the range of movement. And lo and behold, within a month, she's actually squatting fairly deeply, unaided and assisted with anything. And she's got strength in her legs that she tapped into. That strength was probably always there. Mm-hmm. It was about learning how to balance and learning what that movement should feel like. So we've gone from, that I would say that high performing amateur right the way through to someone who was probably, if they were left to go much longer, would have been probably a lot more sedentary now had they not joined that program.
So it's a scenario where the person has, with your assistance, worked on their physical attributes and skills, and it's also benefited other areas of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, so some of those sort of less able people will come in because, they may have been fit in the past. They may not have been into sport at all. So, but some of them will come in because they just feel as they're aging, they do not want to fall into this trap of becoming more and more sedentary. You can talk about doctor's orders if you like, but they're trying to connect the dots and saying, well, I need to be more active, but I don't know how. So we have that knowledge and expertise here to help them.
Do you think that kind of assistance to people within the community maybe helps them over the long term in terms of health, and maybe in terms of having to visit the doctor less because they've got less problems?
Yeah, I mean, people will always fall ill. There's no two ways about it. But the linkage between having moderate physical activity 3 to 4 times a week and your general physical health is well founded to say that actually being active, getting your heart rate up, and working muscle groups, major muscle groups, and things like that all contribute towards an overall healthier individual. It's not to say that it's going to bomb-proof you and you're going to live forever. We all age, but it certainly helps. And it goes back to how that phrase of how I feel. I feel great. I have a 67-year-old who's deadlifting just under 130 kilos. Now he didn't start there, but he comes in, and when you see him achieve that, and the first time I watched and realised quite how heavy he was getting, it was like, well, you've made some great gains here and stuff. Just be careful how you push it. He says, yeah, I know, but I am doing this and this. So we checked in and made sure he was safe. But yeah, he feels on top of the moon when he gets close to that 130 match. He's probably got a lot more in the tank, but he stays on his program. He's probably sitting around 90% when he hits that 130. So he has got more, but yeah, it's about how he feels. And before that, when he came in, he was probably way down around 50 kilos. So we've been open 9 months pretty much. So in 9 months, that's where he's come from.
What is a program, and how is it organized? Well, the programs are organized around individuals. We do use a framework for generally people
it's their first ever program and their focus is strength gain, then the program we use generally sits on three to three phases. Depending on what the condition of the individual is when they enter the program, depends a lot on how each phase, how much is in each phase, how each individual works out. But the first phase is generally it's a preparatory phase in terms of helping an individual become conditioned for the main event, which is, it can be anything from 5 to 8 weeks long. And that generally has a strength focus, a muscular endurance focus. We do things like interval training within there, and that just helps the overall. We sort of term it with being comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that's the piece that we try and get a lot of the unconditioned guys through. So that first phase, it can be quite quick. If someone's already got a good level of conditioning, we don't have to spend too much time in there. What we also do in that first phase is we'll watch how an individual moves, we'll work out what their ranges of movement are, their mobility, how they move quite well through the whole spectrum of workouts that we give them. So it's not just about that improvement in terms of strength and stuff like that, it's about how well they move and how safe they are. Then when we start the main thrust of it, what we call phase 2, that generally will drill into really what their goals are. So if someone needs speed, then we will have lots of speed sessions within that. If someone is after strength, then it'll be a strength workout, a set of strength workouts. What we generally do is focus on fairly big lifts, and it's generally how we put those big lifts into the program. And then after that, we do some accessory work. So we're not just developing the big muscle groups. We're also looking at supporting structures like the rotors around the hip to make sure that the hip is looked after. And whilst that skeletally, it's a very strong joint and take a lot of force through it, the shoulder joint is almost the opposite. So you've got a lot of fine material around it, connective tissue, small muscle groups that are prone to injury. And if we get too dominant on these big superficial muscles, we're going to damage our shoulders. So we do a lot of work in those areas to help switch some of that smaller connective tissue on to help reduce the risk of injury for individuals. The last phase generally focuses on, it's more conditioning based. We up the ante, the work rate, and we'll probably drop quite a bit of the weight for those guys who are into their sports type thing, and that's where we really focus in their sports movements and what they're trying to achieve to improve their performance. For some of them, it's that last thrust to hitting whatever their goal is. So if it's a strength goal, we might look at we're going to continue on the strength, but we're going to play with sets, reps, and rest periods and things like that a little bit more refined for that individual. So the end product can actually look very different from one person to the other, but the frameworks are generally quite similar because the bodies adapt and change in a similar fashion.
And if a client is struggling or having problems or is maybe unhappy with the program, is there some way that you can sit down with them and talk about how to change it and make it better?
Yeah, we do that frequently. So we do a testing piece at the beginning and we test again at the end. And the testing protocol is the same at front and back. But some people, when they come in, they may hold back on their test, and suddenly you realise that actually they're far more capable in a certain area than the test perhaps led us to believe that it's like a series of gym tests. Sometimes you might find they may have had a really good day, and so they've got close to a 1 rep max of say 100 kilos, for example, and then when you go and feed that 80% in the program and you start adding a few reps to it, they just don't have that in the tank at that time. So we very quickly have to change that, because obviously we don't want to injure somebody. We want them to maximize their results at the end of the program. So we constantly adjust through that program and make sure that by having we generally have 2 supervised sessions, but between myself and Holly, one of the other coaches, we're constantly having those conversations and changing numbers and making sure that clients are on it. I had one client who he did his phase 1, he smashed it, no problems, got to phase 2, starting some heavy lifts, was doing quite well, and then his performance in those lifts really dropped off, and we couldn't work it out, and it was over about a week and a half, and it was like, right, can we revisit your nutrition? What's your nutrition like? And he essentially admitted he'd had breakfast. He was having a busy spell at work. He'd had breakfast, hadn't eaten anything through the day really other than the odd coffee and biscuit, and then was coming in post work about 7 o'clock at night expecting to lift heavy, having not fueled the body. Well, nutrition is a huge part of performance, and so we kind of had a complete reset and worked out how he was going to feed himself through the day. And it isn't just simple, well, go and buy something and eat it. It's right, okay, so maybe we need to go into a meal prep. This is how we can organize meal preps. You can, how you can make feeding yourself easier through the week by maybe on a Sunday preparing your meals for the week, shove them in the freezer, and you can microwave them and your job's done. So and that actually worked really well for him. So yeah, so he got very he did very well out of it, and then suddenly these workouts, he's absolutely annihilating them again, and it's like, well, you fed yourself, and that's what it's about.
It sounds very much like a complete holistic form of support that the center is able to provide for the community, because you've got you've got all the physical and all the mental aspects there. You even drill into the food and the right kinds of food for people to eat. That's part 1. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for part 2.
Made in Moray is a product of the Academy of Language Therapy and Life Coaching. Book a free online personal or professional development consultation today. What are you waiting for?